Days of Wellness with the Wellness Professor Leo Simpson II is back. All right. And today I'm going to be talking about influence wellness. Now, we've talked about wealth wellness, we've talked about purpose wellness, we've talked about mindset wellness yesterday. We getting into this wellness thing. What's going on, my man? Good to see you on. We are talking about wellness. Remember that state of being well, that aspect of producing prosperity and intentionally pursuing it. And when it comes to influence, I'm going to deal with influence from its verb state, not from its noun state. Meaning, I'm not going to deal with influence from the standpoint of what it is, because what it is kind of corresponds to leadership. You know, John Maxwell says that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less, right? But I'm not dealing with it from that side. I'm dealing with it from the verb standpoint, which is like your release, your energy, your value that you release. And you know, it's interesting. I got my man on live because he can tell you a little bit about influence, right? Anyway, let me get off of that. And so here's what I want to really get in your mind. Let me tell you a quick story of experience that I had just over this past weekend and week, in order for you to get the context of what I'm speaking about with regard to influence wellness, right? Now, if you listen to that, on the one hand, I'm talking about influence wellness as something. But if you listen to it, it also is an encouragement, somewhat of a command of you need to do this, influence wellness, right? So we want to be able to influence wellness, but I want to talk more about the aspect of influence wellness, the power of when you are influencing, what the value is there. So here's that story. So I teach as a professor at a local community college here in the Houston area, Lone Star College. I'm at the Montgomery campus. And we had our kickoff for this spring semester. And one of the cool things they did was they had this time set aside for faculty and staff to be able to kind of just meet in this particular location to engage in kind of like a game experience. You know, you have a game day, right? So I get in there and I walk in kind of early, and I'm looking around to see what type of games are set on the tables. They got ping pong, they got foosball, they got a few other things, chess, etc. And so I'm like, all right, what is it that I want to play, right? And I'm there early before other people, so I'm scoping out what I want to get into, right? And just so happened, our new vice president of instruction, I'd met her at a conference back in November and forgot, you know, that I met her, but I was looking in her face. I was like, I've met you before. Anyway, so I was like, hey, I'm looking to get ready to get at this domino table, right? I'm looking for some people. She's like, I've never played dominoes before. I said, oh, you haven't? Well, would you like to learn? She was like, yeah. Okay, true to form, a professor, a teacher, like I got to teach somebody, right? And so we sat down at the domino table. A couple other people sat down at the domino table. They played dominoes before, but they were like not like the people who played dominoes a lot. And then she hadn't learned. So we're teaching like as we're playing. And one of the best things you got to understand before we go any further, you got to know that there's a lot of value in teaching people while you do something. Don't get me wrong. I don't mind teaching in the classroom. I love it. But I love the value of being able to teach people as you go along the way. That's one of the beauties of being a coach, being able to come alongside of somebody while they're doing the thing. And so when I was out in the field in the HVAC industry, it was awesome to be able to teach people while we were doing it, right? So here it is, because I've been in a lot of environments where I was teaching people while I was doing it. This was just a natural walk in the park to me, right? So I'm sitting down at the table and we're teaching everything, talking the details, showing, okay, this is what we're doing. This is why we do this. This is when we do this. This is the thought. And man, it was just natural. So much and so that there was another person who took Dr. Brandy's place, sat at the table, And this guy, he had never played dominoes 4 points before. And he was like, what are y'all doing? How are you scoring and all this? And before it was done, this guy, he's a PhD in English. Before it was all done, this guy was like, first of all, I learned a lot at the domino table, but I learned a lot of things that had nothing to do with dominoes by doing this thing and learning dominoes. Now, here's why I bring this up. So the guy and I, we ended up having a conversation further, and then going further in the conversation, there was a place that he actually had been looking for. He had been looking for somewhere that he could actually connect with he and his family, and it just so happened to be a place that I was connected with. And he didn't say that he was looking for it. He just asked me for the information. I shared with him the information, and this is a place I go to on a regular basis. Next thing you know, I see him and his family roll up at the place. Now, why do I bring that up? I bring it up because the truth of the matter is, I didn't invite him to the place. I didn't even tell him about the place to the extent that I wanted him to come to the place. I mean, if he wants to come, sure. If he wants to show up, sure. Not a big deal. But I did not approach him from the context that I wanted him to actually in any way connect with that place. I'm just answering his questions. I'm sharing with him the information he's asking. But because of the impact of influence that I had with him, guess what I discovered? Influence is an invitation. Ooh. Now look, I can't take credit for that. I got that from my mastermind partner, Carl Wynn Jr. Carl Wynn Jr., he's actually an entrepreneur. He's also soon to be author, getting ready to launch his first book, which I'm so excited about it. But he and I, we've been mastermind partners for a long time. And dedicated, I think, over the last couple years, maybe a few years. And every Monday we have what we call an exponential growth session. Now, if you want to know how to create your own exponential growth session, go ahead down in the comments and say, man, I would love to have an exponential growth session. I want to be able to identify how to, get me a mastermind partner and start doing that, maybe just once a week. Get down in the comments and say, hey, I want to know how to create my own exponential growth session. I want to be able to get my own mastermind partner, and we'll make sure to get you connected with my exponential growth coach and mastermind partner so he can help you get things moving. That said, we were in our mastermind session this morning, our exponential growth session this morning, 6:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. Oh, man, it's good. And I shared that story with him, and he said, Leo, influence is the invitation. I said, ooh, that's good, Carl. That's good, Carl Jr. And so I said, man, I was thinking along the lines of the same thought process for my live today. I was like, that's what I'm going to share about. Influence wellness. Here's what I mean by influence wellness. Let me give you some verb synonyms for influence. Affect, okay? Have an effect on. Exert influence on. Determine, guide, control, form, shape, govern, decide, regulate, change, alter, modify, transform, impact on, sway, bias, prejudice, color, predispose, suborn, bring pressure to bear on, pressurize, right? Lean on, pull strings with, twist someone's arm. And as you see in these synonyms, you start getting to where it starts at somewhat passive, but yet aggressive in it being active, passive and active at the same time. But then it gets to where it starts to sound a little more aggressive and active, right? And one of the things you've got to understand is influence has, a range of, again, activity And we're talking about the verb, so we're talking about the active form. So influence is active. But you've got to understand that there's a level of passiveness and a level of aggressiveness where you want to be able to, on the one hand, get into a sweet spot, but also understand when passive is needed versus active is, passive versus aggressive. That's really what I'm trying to say. It's passive active, and then it's aggressive active. That's what I want you to see. Let me give it to you again. When you're thinking about influence in its active sense, from the verb standpoint, not what it is, but it's doing, right? It's activity. You want to see, okay, it's active, but there's a range where you've got passive active, then you got aggressive active, right? And the aggressive active can also be in the context of passive active. Oh, Leo, you're confusing me. What do you mean? Here's what I mean. When I say passive active, you can be passively active in the context of your influence with the person, and aggressively active as it pertains to your influence as it relates to you yourself and releasing it. And here's what I mean. I in no way was trying to influence my colleague to connect with the environment, the community, the group that I was connected with. No way. I didn't even know he was looking for some type of environment or a place to connect with in regard to what he asked me about. I didn't. However, I was being so aggressively active in who I am and what I'm capable of being and doing to where I was just being natural. Just natural. I was just being natural. As a matter of fact, I want to pull up something real quick here. Yesterday, as we were talking about mindset, there was something in the context of mindset that was very unique that I really want to jump back into for a quick moment. And it was in regard to mindset. One of the things with regard to the historical definitions is inclinations, right? And in the context of inclinations, that's a person's natural tendency or urge to act or feel in a particular way, a disposition or propensity, right? So in other words, what you can gather is if I have mindset wellness, then I can have influence wellness, because that means that if influence in the verb sense is active, then that means that I have, in the context of my propensity, my disposition, or my predisposition, I'm very likely to act in consistency with that disposition with a certainty. If I have influence wellness, listen to me carefully. If I have influence wellness, if you have influence wellness, what you're going to see is that you're going to be absolutely committed to releasing and unleashing the fullness of who you are on a regular basis with aggressive activity. You're not going to be passive about it. Passive activity means that there's a level of restraint that you exhibit because you don't want to actually create the manipulative aspect, which manipulation can be in the context of influence. So when you're dealing with people, you want to be more inclined to be passively active in the context of your influence than aggressively active, unless your aggressive activity is designed to help them and bring them value in the context of a situation that it is applicable for, which is why you need that range. But in the context of yourself, with regard to your disposition and your propensity, your natural tendency, and your urge to act or feel in a particular way, you need to be aggressively active in that. In other words, you need to be aggressively active in your mindset being unleashed and released, acted upon, so that one, first and foremost, you are exhausting the value that exists in you. And then other people are able to get it as they need it. See, To be a person who has influence wellness, it really speaks that you are consistently committed to making sure you release the value of who and what you are on a day-to-day basis, simply because you would be doing yourself a disservice first and foremost if you do not. Let me say this. You, me, and anybody else who does not commit to being aggressively active in releasing their influence, does not exhibit the fullness of what you want to call it, influence wellness. And guess what? You are doing yourself a disservice before you get to think about anybody else. You know, I think it's very important, because there's a perspective that I got from Paul, who was formerly Saul of Tarsus, and a huge influencer in the Christian world, wrote many of the letters in the New Testament of the Bible. And he said this to I think it was the people who were in Philippi. He said to them, he said, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself." Watch this. Then he says, to clarify his statement and to confirm it, he goes on and says, "Look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others." Now, I want you to catch something here. He says, look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others. Now, there's some people who have looked at that perspective that he shared in the past to not focus on your interest, but focus on others' interests and their interests primarily. I'm not going to get too much into it, but I want to focus on this piece. Here's what you got to gather from the perspective that he shares. The interest of others is pivotal. Your own interest is pivotal. However, listen to me carefully. Your interest being pivotal will not in any way be of value if you don't give regard to the interest of the other. However, if you give interest to the other being pivotal and act as though yours is not pivotal, equally pivotal, then you are diminishing yourself in clear fashion. And let me tell you, this is one of those things that I know of personally. I diminished my value. I diminished my influence such that I wasn't just passively active with regard to my influence at a certain point in my life. I was passively inactive, meaning I was literally trying to deactivate my influence while trying to release it for the value of somebody else. And that's confusion. And to be honest, while I was giving some value to people, because I was trying to deactivate or deactivating, making inactive my influence, what was happening was I was diminishing the value of the influence the other person gets. Let me get back to the story. Remember, I did not invite this guy to connect with the community, the environment, the group that it was that I was connected with. I didn't invite him. He asked me for the information, and he showed up on his own. Almost knocked my stuff over. He showed up on his own. I was glad to see him. I was glad that he came and felt that it was a wonderful environment for him to bring his family into. But it said a lot about my influence. Why? I was absolutely aggressively active in being consistent with my propensity, my disposition, my natural tendency, my urge to act or feel in a particular way, my mindset. And so much and so, I was so aggressively active to the extent that he felt that it was an invitation for him to then be a part of the environment. Why? It really wasn't the environment. It was his experience with me said something about who I was connected to, what I did, what I was committed to, and the values that I had, my mindset, my inclinations, my personal natural tendency, my propensity, my disposition, to where he was like, what I'm looking for, and it sounds like this guy might be connected with it, I can actually go and check it out, and I think I'm going to find what it is I'm looking for. There are people who need what you have. There are people who need what you're connected with. There are people who need who you're connected with. And if you're not aggressively, actively releasing your propensity, your disposition, your urge to act or feel in a particular way, your natural tendencies, they're not going to get connected with it. But also, if you're not doing that aggressively active, you're also diminishing your own value. I love when I talk about that phrase that I got from Paul. And I always mention it from the standpoint of this aspect of connection. Let me put this right here for a moment. All right. So I use this analogy where, okay, this is me, right? And this is others, right? Okay. So this is my interest and this is the interest of others. Can I take the interest of others and put it into my interest? No, in no way, shape, form, or fashion. Okay. However, can I take my interest and put it into the interest of others? Absolutely. So in other words, what Paul said to that group in Philippi that he actually wrote to was, listen, when he said, look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others, what he's saying is take your interest and embed it in the interest of others. So that what happens is when you look to the interest of others, you're not diminishing your interest. You're literally meshing your interests together, merging your interests together so that there's a mutual value of their interest and your interest, because the concept really is that when you give value and focus to the interests of others, it returns value to your interest. Matter of fact, that's the whole context of being paid for your work. When you're paid for your work, what are you being paid for? You're being paid for the value you've released as a means of reward for that value being released and the benefit of it being received. That's it. It's an exchange of value. Come on now. But here's the thing. If you give little influence, if you give casual influence, if you give passively active influence, what happens is you position yourself to where you don't just diminish your value, your influence, you actually diminish the exceptional value that other people get on the other side. Hugely valuable to understand that. See, I got to say this again. You've got to have wellness in your influence, because it's consistent with the post that I'm sharing today. And in that post, I say, do you want wellness influence, or do you want influence wellness, right? And then I ask, okay, or not I ask, I say, if you want wellness influence, here's what you do. Be influenced by greatness, okay? Then be an influencer of greatness, and then inspire others to influence greatness. That's called aggressively active influence. That's true wellness in your influence. That's true influence wellness. Listen to me. If you want influence wellness, here's what you need to do. Be influenced by greatness. I shared this with a friend of mine yesterday. I said, people don't understand the value. And this is going to lead to the context of leadership. And we'll talk about leadership in another wellness on this journey of the 21 days of wellness. I shared with my friend, I said, people really don't understand the importance of being a good follower in order to be a good leader. And then they don't understand how important it is for good leaders when working with other leaders to be a representation of good followers, because they know what it means to be a good leader. And what you've got to understand is, if you want to see a world full of powerful, impactful, very inspirational leaders in the future, you need to position some future leaders to be some great followers. You need to show them how to follow well, because being able to follow well positions you to understand the dynamics as it pertains to the very constructs of leading well. Oh, we're going to get into leadership wellness very soon. It may not be tomorrow. It may be. You never know. You got to tune in. But you've got to be influenced by greatness before you can influence greatness, before you can be an influencer of greatness. Beyond that, once you become an influencer of greatness, you need to multiply your influence of greatness by inspiring others to influence greatness. You see, I just want to reiterate it. Here's what you got to understand. A great teacher is somebody who understands the value of repetition, right? Meaning you communicate the concept over and over again. Matter of fact, I have to say this because I talked about niching earlier in the focus of the 21 days of wellness. And one of the unique aspects of niching is you actually identify the thing that you are about all the time. And guess what? When you are about that thing all the time, you can repeat that thing over and over and over and over and over again, and people will not get tired of it. Why? Because it is the thing that they need from you, right? For me, being the wellness professor, people need wellness from me. And they need wellness in the very constructs of various aspects of their life. They need leadership wellness. They need friendship wellness. They need mindset wellness. They need leadership wellness. I think I already said that. They need work wellness. They need partnership wellness. They need business wellness. They need system wellness. They need relationship wellness. They need parenting wellness. They need sibling wellness. They need wellness. And why not come to the person who specializes in wellness? Guess what? But you got to know what your area of influence is. You got to know what your specific, unique fingerprint is, so you can release it. But I got to say it again. Do you want wellness in your influence? Do you want influence wellness? Start with this. Be influenced by greatness. Be influenced by the greats. Be influenced by those who are doing well in the thing you want to do well in. You gotta follow greatness. But then, don't stop at being a follower. Take what you've gotten from those who've influenced you in greatness, and now you begin to influence others in greatness. Here's what I mean. One of the ways in which you are able to determine if you know something is not only if you can teach it to others, meaning that you can give them the information, but you can teach it to others in giving them the information to where they can then take it and put it into implementation. Right? So translate what you received in being influenced by greatness to now be an influencer of greatness. The things that you're doing well in, give people how to do well in it. And not just to know it well, but to be able to do it well so that they can become aggressively active in their influence of releasing what it is that's valuable in them. And then you got to go inspire others to influence greatness. In other words, inspire others to then repeat this cycle, right? And so at the core, you want to understand that influence wellness is a threefold reality. It's a trifold, it's a trilogy, it's a triad that if you're going to have influence wellness, you can't just be influenced. You can't just influence. You have to then multiply influence in others. You have to multiply the commitment to be an influencer in others, right? You got to position others to be influencers. Why? Because if you have no influence, you go back to those definitions. You have no influence. What you have is, let me go to the synonyms. I mean the antonyms. That was actually something that I wanted to do. Those antonyms. Here's some of those antonyms of influence from the verb standpoint. We got leave alone, neglect, prevent, stay, stop, delay, deter, discourage, dissuade, halt, hinder, mismanage, disenchant. See, let me tell you, I was the guy who was Mr. Delay. I was the guy who was Mr. Halt. I was the guy that dissuaded myself rather than persuaded myself. And see, going back to my story at the beginning with my colleague who I did not invite to the community opportunity, the environment that I was a part of, I didn't. He's just like, hey, can you give me the information? And he would say, I'd love to show up. He said, hey, man, share that with me. I'd love that information. Surprised to see him in the environment with us. But should I have been surprised? I guess to a degree because I didn't directly invite him. But my influence was so influential to where it became an invitation. Not just for the environment, but my value in my influence gave him a perception that the environment had value in it that was worth for him to look into and bring his family. You see, that's powerful. So let me say this. In the context of your influence, don't necessarily be focused on what you say. And even don't just be focused on what you do. Be focused on how what you say and what you do is consistent with really who you are and the mindset you actually have. See, that goes back to yesterday. You got to have mindset wellness. Having mindset wellness positions you to where you can have influence wellness, so that the propensity, the disposition, the natural tendency that you have is able to be intentionally released in the context of what you're doing and can permeate in the environment to where people are able to get the value of it and it be inspiring to them to where it becomes an invitation to them. When you have influence wellness, I want you to understand that your influence becomes an invitation. I mean, that's what every good business, every good relationship, every good opportunity has. It has this unique value of wellness in the influence, to where the truth of the matter is that influence wellness makes the influence to be an invitation. It's good. Now, let me tell you again, if you want to discover how you can have a mastermind partner creating an exponential growth session and all that kind of stuff and how to set that up, like I said, go down in the comments and say, hey, I want to learn more about an exponential growth session, and I'll make sure to get you in touch with my mastermind partner, my good friend, Carl Wynn Jr. I tell you, he's got an excellent piece of content coming soon called Nothing is a Waste. And this is an example of the power of influence. Carl was being who he was. He is all about nothing is a waste. And I had a very dark time in my life that Carl gave me a call. Didn't even know where I really was in that moment in my mindset. But when he called, we started to talk and he could see where I was. And when I tell you, he picked me up with his perspective of nothing is a waste and helped me to see how I could leverage everything of my past experiences and put myself back on the trajectory to be able to move forward. I can guarantee you this, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for nothing is a waste, because that brother of mine has given me so much value. So again, if you want to create an exponential growth session for yourself and be able to be in a position to where you got a weekly interaction with a mastermind partner and discover somebody that you want to be a mastermind partner when you want some information on that, like I said, down in the comments, go ahead and put your information and say, hey, I want to learn more about exponential growth sessions, and we'll make sure to get you connected with my man, Carl Wynn. Listen, as I usually say as I close, be well, right? And as a result of today, have influence wellness. Be well in your influence and be great. You hear me now?